let's start with a quick show of hands. How many here have actually put machine learning in production? In production, not keep your hands up. Just look around yourself. How many people are there in the room? 10%, 20%? Now keep your hands up. Please keep them high. Here's the second filter. How many of you have put machine learning in production where it involves with money? Real money, not conversions, not clicks, not foot traffic, not video analytics, nothing of that sort. Money. Few. I still see you. Some of you should come and talk to me. I'm very interested. And finally, of those few people standing, it's a rhetorical question, but how many of you have put machine learning in production which involves money, where the cost of false positive is losing money? It's not making money, it's losing money. None. Oh, there's one guy. Please come and meet me. I'll take you for dinner. This is unfortunately what I had to do in 2006, before big data existed. This is before Hadoop existed. We were looking at $4 billion of revenue, and at the mouth of the pipeline, how do you filter clicks, which is money? $90 billion of Google is actually clicks. All these data revolution came from the ad world, which is what people don't understand. So this makes me feel something like this. You know, the guy before me showed Amitabh Bachchan, I'm showing Gandalf. You know, not that bad, you know, still have some hair, still not that white, but it feels like that. Today, I'm going to talk to you about, which will make you feel more like this. Because I'm not going to sell you any buzzwords, digital transformations and all that. Because unfortunately or fortunately, I'm an engineer by training. And when I hear those words, my brain just fart. So I'm going to, honestly, if you are not interested in taking the red pill, please leave. Because it will be uncomfortable. It won't be comfortable. But since you're all staying, I'm assuming you want to take the red pill and you want to understand the matrix, right? So let's go in. So this is a topic that has been very close to me. I've been watching the rise of India as an Indian who has moved to Silicon Valley, always thinking about moving back to India for personal reasons, looking at the ecosystem of India develop from Silicon Valley's lens. And I wanted to start with talking about what was the phases of technology innovation in India. And if you think about it, you know, obviously it started with services. 90s and 80s was all about services. The next decade gave us what I would like to call them as apps, startups, you know, whatnot. And we are kind of in the middle of this or to the tail end of that. The next revolution gave us products, two product companies, which can be called as product par with the apples of Silicon Valley or Google's or who not. But the final phase is essentially these platform companies, which are amazingly coming, and there are like 6 or 7 coming from China, and there are probably 10 coming from Silicon Valley, right? I mean, this you can count on the hand, right? So the question is, when will the next platform company be built out of India? And the part to note is that all of these are data-first companies. They begin and die with data. I don't know if you know the story, but in '98, when Google was founded in the dorm room of Stanford, they used to use this cheap hard disk to store logs. And at one point of time, the hard disk became full. And somebody said, we should delete the logs because we are getting too much traffic. And Sergey and Larry said, nope, we will reject consumers, but we will not delete data. Now, here's a funny question. Go out there and look at every single cloud provider. The first product they'll sell you is retention of data, cost of data, how much is your data retained, do I keep it forever? Google has not lost a single log from 1998, right? And we are sitting here building data lakes and you know whatnot, but that's what they are. The key thing to note here is that I'm not saying this in a negative parlance. When I go around Bangalore and basically I've spoken with half of the 30 unicorns of India, and this is not a negative parlance that, oh, we have services mindset and, you know, somehow we make something work. This is a natural evolution of an industry. It is nothing different about it. US went through it and we are going through it as our economy and society evolves. So if this is the platform of India, the first thing is let's define a platform. And it goes to look at current sort of let's compare these logos, right? Uber versus Lyft. Uber is worth, whatever, 80 billion, I don't know the latest valuation. Lyft is worth 30% of it, 20% of it, right? Pretty credible number two player, but it's worth 20% of what Uber is worth. WhatsApp versus WeChat, we all know that fight that went on for so long. Netflix versus Prime, Netflix is still number one in entertainment, but Prime is pretty close second. Apple versus Google, the classic fight that went on between iOS and Android. And Zynga versus Facebook, right? If you pay close attention, you see that these app companies, they just go from what Peter Thiel calls 0 to 1, right? They just go for capturing the whole market. And that's great. I mean, VCs pour dollars into it, they put more fuel, and that's how they go. So this is my definition of a platform. I'm not saying that this is the definition of a platform mindset. The number one rule is that it's a close second product, whatever definition of close is, but it builds moat along with growth, right? We have so many IIM MBAs trying to build growth teams in startups and big companies, but they actually focus on building moat and horizontal strategy as opposed to just going after one. Some could argue that it's a natural artifact of being a second player, right? Because you're a second player. Lyft opened up his analytics platform much before Uber ever will. WhatsApp is not interested in becoming a platform. Even 5 years after they are acquired by Facebook, they were not interested in becoming a platform but WeChat had no choice. That's the only way they could compete. So WeChat became a platform. And then you can go on Prime and so on and so forth. The second thing is that they have multiple hedged options for generating business ROI. They are not drunk on the VC dollars and just go after it, and become Snapdeal and then see the e-commerce graveyard of India, right? They are interested in hedging their bets because Google sells the Android operating system but also sells Nexus and then also sells, whatever, because it's a platform company by definition. Apple will never sell iOS by itself, right? Apple will always sell it as a product. It is not interested in selling small pieces. And the final, and probably the most important, is that they will cannibalize their own apps if they see a better app, sometimes through M&A, sometimes, and this has happened in the Indian ecosystem if you pay close attention to Myntra being acquired by Flipkart and now Flipkart being part of Walmart, right? So that is my definition of a platform. I'm not recommending that everybody agree to it, but this is what I would say are platform mindset companies. So what are the three pillars of building a platform? It's actually pretty dumb. Cloud, APIs, be aware of that, and finally data. And this is interesting because we have all heard the microservice story and hey, we should have elastic cloud and all that. That's important, but you have to go under the hood and understand how much investment these companies do. Even Google got the API strategy wrong, right? Amazon got it, Facebook got it, but Google got it wrong. But data has always been this one thing which is, yes, we are going to use big data, AI, machine learning for platform, we are going to, do personalization, we'll drive growth, conversion rates, all of that, which is great in the first decade when you're going in attracting consumers. But data as a part of a platform strategy is something that only few companies in the world do, and they do it extremely well, right? So where is data today, right? And I was visiting a retail customer, a Fortune 100 retail customer in New York, and I was coming back, and in Virgin flight, this pilot gave me a very good metaphor to describe it, and I thought it's very apropos to our world. If you look from travel time from New York to SFO, right? A direct flight is roughly 6 hours. That 6 hours has not changed since 1960s, right? Since the time that we actually got aviation, Pan AM was the name of the airline, and now it's American Airlines. It's been 6 hours, 540, 6 hours, something like that. 100 years before that was the railroad, and they connected New York and San Francisco in the middle, somewhere in Utah, and it took 10 days to go via train, right? Before that, it was 200 days, close to 6 months or something, pre-1870, right? It's pretty clear Google is there, right? Google has been there since 2006 because I fought the battle with Google on click fraud. If you're interested in knowing more about it, let me know, and I can tell you exactly why we lost, right? Exactly why Yahoo lost and why Google won is because Google is there. Everybody else is not. Period. Not Amazon, nobody. They are there. Nobody else is there, right? But the unfortunate reality is that they have been there since 2006. It's not like they've been there, and 13 years is 3 generations in the world of our technology. One could argue that Flipkart in India is actually where the railroad is today, right? I mean, they have a product mindset, they have the engineering prowess to actually take on Amazon. They're doing more recommendations than Amazon, personalization recommendations per day. And they have built a credible team of thousands of engineers to actually manage this railroad, right? The rest of us are here, like it or not, right? And yes, you will realize this is happening in Silicon Valley. You see what's happening with Cloudera, you see what's happening with a lot of big data companies. MapR is gone, Hortonworks is sold, there is no Hadoop layer left. I mean, I call it the midlife crisis of big data, right? But data by itself is very valuable because I have put machine learning in production. I've seen $100 million have a net impact, right? So there's definitely a chasm that is going on right now. And one of the fundamental reasons of that chasm, and you guys are not supposed to read that, this is from Gartner, by the way. They look at non-digital companies, which is 15, 20 companies that you should ignore, like Netflix and Google and others. And they went and talked to 4,000 people. 4,000 people across the globe. These are people who are running analytics officers, CIOs, all of them, right? And they essentially asked them, which is the #1 cutting edge technology that you think will change your organization? Guess what #1 shows up, right? And it's AI and machine learning. Everybody says that, right? And what they do is very interesting. Of that 4,000 people, they compare industries. So this is retail, and I intentionally took retail because guess what? There is a retail apocalypse happening, Amazon effect, Amazon is killing everybody and all that. So I said, let's see, if the fear is that hard, let's see what that industry is doing. Let's forget about everybody else, right? And what they're saying is that, yes, across the board, everybody is saying that we should invest in AI and machine learning. The reality, though, is that when you actually go and look at retailers, and I have talked to about 20 of them, all of them are in San Francisco, Sephora, Gap, whatever, it's actually 8th. This is a question that they ask. Gartner does this very interesting. They basically say, what do you think is a good technology? But then they say, why are you going to write the check, right? Like, let's see on the ground, what are people doing? It's actually 8th. It's that bad, right? But here's the interesting part. The people who are the top performers in their industry, and usually this implies Walmart, Target, whoever, for them, it's still #1, which means that the best people are saying what they're doing, and they're doing what they're saying. Right? And then they're actually putting money where their mouth is. Now, whether they win or lose, that's a second question, but they're at least doing what they are being told to do, right? The most ironic part that I got from this is actually the second row, which is after, I would say, 3 decades of the business intelligence term was coined, everybody says that we are going to throw more and more money on business intelligence. It's ridiculous, right? I mean, we have lots of vendors out there selling you cool dashboards and God knows what all. And everybody is saying that business intelligence, there's a bad joke in Silicon Valley, business intelligence is pretty unintelligent. That's really what it is. I mean, it's actually dumb, to be honest. And ironically, 4,000 people, very senior level people globally are telling that my business intelligence thing doesn't work. I just came yesterday from a unicorn of India who said, my query on Redshift takes 30 minutes. What can I do? Whatever, right? I mean, this is ridiculous. This is 2019, right? We are not sitting in 1990s, but we are living the dial-up days of analytics, right? So, what's the solution, right? And I'm going to keep this short because of lots of reasons, but the #1 solution, beyond all the jargon, beyond the titles of data science and all of that, is this. When computer science first got traction in the 60s from Stanford and Berkeley, and you see the revolution happening, we all studied, and if you look at the syllabus, we all studied the same thing, right? Algorithms and automata theory and whatnot. It needed a heavy dose of software engineering to create the giants that we have today. In an interview, you no longer ask someone, can you do a breadth first search? I mean, some people do. But you actually go and ask them, if that process fails in production, how are you going to ensure that the system has finance reliability, right? That's what made Google Google, right? Google is one of these best companies which marries software engineering extremely well with everything they do, right? So that was the thing that happened with computer science, which is why we got what we got. That same thing has to happen with data science. right? We are living in the world of math and algos and whatnot, but we are not asking the question, how does your model, are you sure your model actually gave you the lift or you got lucky? Is the wave rising, then everybody is going to rise, right? And so are you really lucky as your model is going live? Do you know when the model actually atrophies and doesn't work? Few people ask those questions. They just clap, model went live, my conversion rate went up, great, the growth guy is happy, my revenue is coming good, done. 6 months later, he's out of there, his stock options are vested, the model has actually gone pretty bad, right? And nobody knows. That's the real honest reality of Bangalore, the best cutting edge of the cutting edge of the cutting edge people. I'm talking of unicorns of India. I'm not talking about, rest of us, right? So we need to have that level of philosophy, and which is something that I have been saying for almost 16 years, which is we had that level of philosophy, but we lacked the level of engineering that Google had, that Yahoo lacked, right? Their feedback loops were working at 500 milliseconds. From the time the relevance model changed, our feedback loop was running at 36 hours. 36 hours in 2006 was a life and death. You might think 36 hours is great. But in your domain, if the best competitor is you're running the feedback loop 500 milliseconds and you are running at 36 hours, you die. There is no middle ground. You just die, right? And the ironic thing is that we settle lawsuits. We were getting sued, by the way, clicks, fraud, and fraud in Facebook. It's still an unsolved problem. But we were getting sued by advertisers, right? Some rumors were that 30% of Google clicks are fraud. I mean, just think for a moment, 30% of Google's revenue could be fraud, right? If Visa came out tomorrow and said that my 2% fraud is there, the whole credit economy would collapse. But the ad ecosystem, they're saying that 30% of it is fraud, right? So anyway, that is how 0 to 1 happens for Google versus Yahoo. And this is happening across industry after industry. You can just see that. It's a pattern, Netflix versus Blockbuster. It just goes on happening after again and again. But here's a funny question that I always ask people. You're hearing data science training courses, you're hearing warehouses and all of it. Just go to Google and look for a data science job. How many data scientists are they hiring? 0. Isn't it ridiculous? The mothership, which gave us all of this, is not hiring a single data scientist. Now, that's not true. They are actually hiring a software engineering with machine learning, but their titles actually indicate what they are trying to hire. They do not go with the FUD of what data science is. And that's the learning from these companies, is that you are hiring software engineers who can do ML. You're not hiring a data scientist who can only do math, right? Because math is great. And by the way, just being absolutely honest, right? I mean, they're hiring researchers from deep learning. They've created this industry, right? That we are just living in right now. But they are giving us this capability and saying that I'm not going to hire a data scientist. And how many of us are hiring a data scientist? It's crazy. There is no such thing. Even the job description is written in a very different way. So now I'm going to go to a very macro level techno stack of what these companies look like. And this is where it's going to be a red pill. It's going to hit you in the gut. If it does, I apologize. First, they start with apps, right? And they start with apps and say, I call it the app of one, right? It's not personalization, it's not segmentation, it's not anything. That app is your app, right? It's completely, it's promiscuous, as I call it, right? It's not married to a population, it's promiscuous, and everybody looks like it's my wife, right? This app, I'll give an example. Amazon Prime in 2007, when it launched in the US, I'm talking long back, I got a plasma TV, I put an Ethernet connection because it didn't have Wi-Fi, and I started browsing my first $8 movie, first HD movie that plasma TVs would give you, right? And again, it feels old. But in 30 minutes down, the movie started buffering. And I was like, what the hell? I spent $8, and now I want to go and brag to my friends that this is what I did. And here is, I'm pissed off, right? I'm pretty angry, right? Before I could call Amazon, because Amazon didn't even have a support number at that point in time, in 25 minutes, I got an email in my inbox saying that we have returned your $8, and here's a coupon for $25. So I called my buddies who were at Amazon. I was like, how the hell did they know that it was buffering? How did Amazon know that it was buffering, right? It's coming through Comcast on some pipe and everything, and my TV could be wrong, right? Amazon had invested in monitoring what is the bit transfer rate in 2007, and before a customer can get annoyed, before he can go and complain on Twitter, they have refunded him and ensured that it's taken care of. That is what
true cognitive apps look like, right? This, I don't know whether to call it machine learning, AI, whatever it's called, but they focused on investing it because they knew that the pipe is inefficient, right? The second thing is your models, and this is where it gets very cranky. You know, I was talking to somebody at Ola and said, yeah, we think we read a Medium post and Stack Overflow and take this model and try to see if that works for my condition and, you know, all of that great stuff. Well, guess what? That's not really machine learning, right? Like I just copied some code from here and tried to put it in there. And I always tell this to folks, which is, yeah, the math is commoditized, right? Like, you know, I worked in the hedge fund industry. In the hedge fund world, latency is the ultimate arbitrage. And you have to understand, eventually the same researchers from Caltech are working in Dish or Goldman Sachs or wherever, and eventually the models get correlated, right? It's the same freaking model. If you feed it the same data, it's going to spit the same output, right? Pretty much. The people are the same. The biases are so ingrained that they are coming from all Ivy League colleges, all the people who are creating this, right? But that's where you have to infuse it with a sense of uniqueness, right? And that's your tribal knowledge, right? You can't, Amazon cannot take that away from you. Sephora's tribal knowledge is Sephora's tribal knowledge, right? Its relationship with the supplier is very different than what Amazon has. And instead of focusing on those uniqueness, they actually focus on getting completely commoditized and try to copy what those guys are doing, right? I call it the unique tribal knowledge, right? Eventually, and this is where it starts to get controversial. All of these guys, I was sitting in 2011, Netflix was the biggest customer of AWS. They were the ones who funded and bought SSD-based machines and, you know, streaming and all that. 2011, I'm talking. They bought up 90% of those machines. You couldn't buy. If you were us, then you couldn't buy. Just 7 years ago, right? The first rule that this guy said, Adrian Cockcroft, who actually was the guy who drove and worked with Amazon on creating these machines, he said, number one rule, hedge your cloud. Always hedge your cloud. If that's where your data is going to be, you have to hedge your cloud, right? Now, I go and ask people here and they're like, yeah, we just run on AWS, right? 7 years. It's only been 7 years. It's not been a generation, right? But we all assume that we're just going to run on the cloud. So they start with multi-cloud. They think multi-cloud, and they do not focus on going with the cheapest option or the lowest hurdle option, because when things are easy, usually you are paying the price for it, just not right now, at the future, right? And the final one, which is your data infrastructure, right? Which is all the cleansing and conduiting and, you know, all of that stuff. And at least I have been telling this for some time to my co-founder, to my team and everybody, and telling them that we almost put data is the new oil, models are the way to convert that oil into energy. Well, guess what? Nobody paid attention to the pipeline, right? Literally and metaphorically, right? And really, none of them use cloud. They don't use SaaS. They don't use open source. And guess what? They don't use consultants to glue it all together. This is the biggest shock. When we go and talk to these unicorns and actually draw down the TCP hops of every single thing in the system, the jaws just drop. They just like, this is what we have built in the last 5 years. This is actually what we have built, right? And then on top of it, we are putting buzzwords like digital transformation, real-time predictive analytics, whatever the buzzword you want, right? If your engine is messed up, how the hell are you going to deliver on that ROI, right? If you still don't believe me, consider this. Does Amazon ads use DynamoDB? No, metaphorical question. Amazon ads, talk to those engineers, and they basically say, DynamoDB is a piece of crap, right? You go to A9, which is actually the search organization, do they use DynamoDB? No, right? But DynamoDB is what they sell on AWS, right? That's what they started AWS with. How many SaaS pixels are on an Amazon app? Rhetorical again, 0. How many SaaS pixels are on that platform company's app? 0. How many SaaS pixels are on any particular app if I snooped it? 10 to 20. 1 pixel to do personalization, 1 pixel to do reporting, 1 pixel to do retargeting, retargeting of retargeting, you know, it's starting to get crazy now, right? How many open source projects does Google AdSense use? 0. They don't. How many open source projects has Google actually open sourced? 1. Actually 2 now. 1. Kubernetes. And that is because they became desperate because they lost the cloud game, right? So it's ironic, right? I mean, you look at, oh, Kafka is open source by LinkedIn, Facebook open source this, but how many has Google done? Actually, what has Amazon open sourced? Nothing. They wrote papers on it, never open sourced anything. But we are living the open source movement, surprisingly, right? And finally, how many clouds does Apple run on? 3. iTunes, I'm talking of iTunes, iCloud, where iMessage and photos and everything goes, right? This is what these guys do, and this is what none of us do. Isn't it ironic? 99% of the world doesn't do what they're trying to do. So, this is where the world is, and I just saw this today at 4 a.m. from Wall Street Journal, by the way. This is how it gets interesting. It's the yin and yang of building a platform company, right? There was a conflict between Amazon's A9 division, because the retail guys were pushing them to push their private label products higher than other people's products, basically cannibalize their own marketplace, right? And they're doing an antitrust search on them and all that. On the other side, just today, FedEx announced that because of me splitting from Amazon, my results will be hit. Because Amazon is building its own supply chain, right? So it's ironic that this game is being played out as we speak today. And we believe that it's possible to build the platforms of India which can fight this game, right? This is not as I said, I'm still giving you the red pill, but I'm going to show you the metrics. So that's the reason why I feel how I feel, right? If you're interested in knowing more, again, this is an half-an-hour talk, and unfortunately, I'm an engineer. If you want to see a real product with real run by real engineers, not the marketing guys who are sitting out there, the guys who write the code, built in Bangalore by 11 people, not an army, who's wanting to take on Google, wanting to take on Amazon, you can meet us. We are here. You can talk to me or just meet us at our booth. I'm also going to give you a very precise talk about specifics, about what exactly to do tomorrow from 3 p.m. because that's an hour. It requires an hour. Engineers can't be as succinct with fancy PowerPoints. Engineers need to show real stuff, right? So if you want to see the real stuff, we can come by in 3, but you can also visit us at the booth today and